Good afternoon and welcome to the Greater Westminster Friday afternoon live stream. Yay!
Hello.
That's a new thing. I'm Becky. This is
Constantine, we got Rishi
Hi,
here
Rishi.
in the house.
Rishi from Nikon School. You may also know him from his YouTube channel.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty successful right now.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, exactly. Well,
How far are you from 20,000 subscribers?
Not very. We're getting there. We're getting
Yeah.
close. So
Cool.
by the end of the year, yeah.
Well, you might have a few more by the end of this. Who
You
knows?
never know.
We'll do a little plug at the end.
Yeah, so part of obviously being a YouTube star, Rishi also works from with Nikon UK.
That's
well,
right.
at Nikon UK. And what's your job at Nikon?
So my official title is a training specialist. So, a lot of people might think that I work at like head office or anything like that, and it's not really the case. So I'm pretty much always training. So I'm always training people either about photography or cameras or anything like that. So it's not your usual daytime job.
No.
Every day is slightly different, and obviously we've adapted. We've changed some of the things that we've been doing recently. So we've been doing a lot more stuff online. And when I say we, there's only two of us. So there's myself and then there's Neil.
Yeah.
We are like the two trainers in the UK. So anything that's kind of Nikon training related, that's what we do.
Excellent.
And then you used to be based at New Oxford Street at Nikon School, isn't it?
Yeah, so we did used to have a base, but I think for the right reasons, that because of that was quite a small base, and with social distancing and things like that, it just wasn't gonna work. I don't think.
No. In fact, we've got quite a few people who say hello. John would like to thank you for all your amazing videos.
Thank you. I did try.
And Graham, Andy, and all sorts of people have said hello. So they're all fans of yours. For those of you who haven't followed or watched us before, please do subscribe to the channel. We go live every Friday afternoon, and then we post videos throughout the week. You may also notice we have it's on that side. There is a fundraising bar for another little gizmo gadget thingy in place of the coffee fund. It's not for that, but we should save up one.
That was the right timing.
So that we can improve the stream even more for you. And I have to say a massive thank you to Ian. For those of you that watched the stream a few weeks back, you might remember we had a little incident with a mug that, let's say...
Let's talk about stability of Nikon mug.
Just this one.
So if you look at the curves, you can see how easy it is to just spill it.
That's Constantine's excuse for spilling coffee on my laptop. So
Ian thought about it.
Thank you, Ian, who actually gave us some structurally sound mugs for our coffee during live stream, which I'm not going to spill. So thank you very much for those. I am, just so that we don't have any incidents, I am going to move them over here, just in case.
No coffee for me today.
No coffee for you. It's not allowed. So hello Randall, you're back after a long time. So please do feel free to ask questions. I will try and keep an eye on the comments. We also have questions that you've sent through by email over the week for Rishi, so we're going to ask about the new models. As you can probably see, we've got some goodies
We do
here.
Yeah.
Some things that we haven't seen yet, so that's going to be very exciting.
Absolutely. One thing I want to ask you, obviously working for Nikon, so how easy is it to get a job at Nikon? Like, shall I move to Japan, or do I have to sell my Canon gear?
You have to sell your Canon gear.
It took me quite a while, I'm not going to lie. So it's not the easiest thing in the world. And like I mentioned, right, there's only two trainers.
Yeah.
So we do have quite a small team.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's the easiest thing in the world, but you never know.
They don't just take anyone, Con.
Yeah.
No hope for you.
I'm sure you'll be good enough, right?
I'll send them a private message on Instagram.
Yeah.
That's right.
Probably not the best way, but yeah.
No. Do you have a relevant question?
Yes. How did you get into photography?
Okay, so photography for me has always been a bit of a strange one, because if you were to ask me about photography when I was like 10 or 12, I wasn't really fussed.
Yeah.
Did you want to be an astronaut?
No, I didn't want to be an
No?
astronaut. I wanted to be a paleontologist.
Oh wow.
I still have quite a strong passion for all things fossils and
Yeah.
dinosaurs and stuff like that. And anyone that knows me will know that that is the case.
Yeah.
And that's what I always wanted to do. And I then went to university and studied. And whilst I was studying, that's how I then started to get into photography. And my part-time job was looking after kind of photography-related areas in retail stores and stuff like that. And then I moved through into kind of, being reps for photography brands, and then regional trainers, and then finally moved into being a trainer for Nikon, and then moving into Nikon School. So it's always been, something that I kind of fell into, and I've always been honest about that. And it just so happened that even though I fell into it, I had an absolute passion for just remembering settings and remembering the technical side of things. So people know that I'm quite a technical trainer.
Yeah.
But it also happened that I could actually take a pretty good photo.
That helps.
Which always helps.
Helps.
So yeah, for me it was a bit of an accident, really. You know, if I never started out with the job progression that I had, then I don't think I'd be here, right? So
wow, you'd be somewhere digging up fossils.
You know, probably
in the desert.
You never know.
No.
You never know.
What was your first camera, and what was your first Nikon camera?
So first camera, I still have it actually. I have an Olympus OM. And had quite a few Olympus film lenses as well.
That's nice.
In terms of Nikon cameras, they would have probably been. My first one was actually digital. I've now got some film stuff as well, but my first kind of Nikon digital camera would have been D40 and D90.
Nice.
And they were the kind of first cameras that I'd used from a digital point of view as well. And then pretty much since then, I've kind of progressed as bodies have progressed.
Yeah.
So, I've shot D750, D500 for about a year and a half, and D850, and then obviously with the progression from D850 into Z series stuff. So
do you shoot any film?
Not now. No, I don't.
That's the only question I had.
Finally, someone said they don't shoot film.
No,
Let's be thank you for being honest about it. So, are you shooting with Zs now? Is that those? That's your primary system.
So, if we were to talk about the types of photography that I thoroughly enjoy, that I'll go and do in my own spare time, that's always going to be wildlife and landscape. I've always been a big fan of stuff like that. So that's what I'll go and do and go and shoot and spend my own time doing. But because of how much I have to train, I also shoot portraiture. We train about weddings. We do speed lights.
We do dog photography.
We do dog photography.
That's my favorite one.
Everything, right? So
I want that training session.
I'm in a great place that yes, I can obviously go and shoot my own stuff that I thoroughly enjoy, but also in my work environment, I can just go and shoot other stuff and things like that. So for me, the current cameras and my same cameras that I have now are the cameras that I've had since the Z series launch. So they're the same two bodies that have stuck with me ever since they first launched as well. So
that's very cool. Does that answer? Did you ask that question?
Well, I want to ask your address and your bank details as well, but I'll skip it for now. So,
sure.
It's good that you're sending through your questions. I am making a note of them because I've tried to make it as easy as possible for Rishi so that we've actually got sort of segments. So the first thing we're going to talk about today, apart from obviously having a look at the models ourselves, I actually haven't picked this up yet.
That's right. How does it feel?
It's heavy because it's got a 51.2 on it for anyone.
I thought it was 59.95 first.
Oh yeah, but that's like this big.
This is
that's a lens.
This is light.
With two hands. This is a lightweight version.
Was it about 1 kilo?
It's about, I don't know the official weight off the top of my head. But
and then you've got the grip with the... Now, these are pre-production models, are they?
100%. So one thing to be clear on is that obviously these are all pre-production stuff.
Yeah.
The lenses, the bodies, the grips, everything is pre-production. So we're expecting the production Z6 stock early November.
Yeah.
And then obviously production Z7 will be early December.
Okay. So in terms of because obviously we've got quite a lot of questions about autofocus and buffer speed and stuff. So you can only tell us based on what you've seen, but it might be different.
100%. And, that's something that, I'm keen to make sure that a lot of people know that obviously with a pre-production camera, it's definitely not final firmware. These are running at like 0.5.
Right.
So they're quite far away from what they'll be when they come to final production units.
Of course.
But, we can talk about the new implementation of autofocus and how the new modes work. It's just, if something doesn't look quite right, it might be because it's not final firmware and things like that. So.
Well, there's quite a lot of questions to do with firmware. So this so could they add Make My Coffee in the firmware update that's coming?
So please note, the things may change. So it's not final, but it's very close to the reality.
100%.
Absolutely. I will just say a very quick thank you to Trevor for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. I'm still going to call it the Coffee Fund. It's just easier. And thank you to Terry as well. Our little bar wasn't working, so I've disabled it. So I'm just going to have to keep an eye on your contributions. But thank you very, very much for those.
We still want that deck, though.
We still want the Stream Deck. It's easier for me to call it the Coffee Fund. It rolls off the tongue. Yes. More than Stream Deck Mini,
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't really roll off the tongue. So why don't you fire away with the first question?
Okay, the main question. So let's talk about autofocus.
Okay.
So I think the most asked question is how much the autofocus has improved. So if you can put number it, or some sort of figure, or as many oranges as you want. So like 9, like 1 out of 10.
1.5.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
what's your impression? What's your opinion?
So one thing I probably wouldn't do is put a number on it, like we said about the pre-production side of things, right? So I've had
you
these
can
cameras.
just show it to me.
Yeah,
just do it.
in a
Like
distance.
how many blinks?
I've had these cameras for quite a while. So
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to be able to shoot with the Z6 II and the Z7 II for quite a while. I've used them in a load of different scenarios, and to me, they perform really nicely. But I don't particularly want to say, they're like this much better or that much better, right? Because I don't know what they're going to be like when it comes to a full production unit.
Sure, but are they better?
So what I would say that's changed massively is implementation of autofocus.
So shall I be in my Z6?
I don't think you necessarily need to get rid of the Z6. It depends on what you shoot, right? Yeah. So if you're a landscape photographer,
sure.
Doesn't really make a massive difference if you're worried about autofocusing performance and things.
So
like
is it 50%? Is it 45.7?
Definitely not going to put a number on it. One thing I would say is that because of the changes to implementation, I think to get better performance out of the autofocus is going to be easier for you.
Sure.
Okay.
So it means that you'll have things that aren't going to be as complicated and so on.
Yeah.
So if I give you a pen and paper and you write it down for me, I won't tell anyone.
Don't do that.
Not going to write it down.
After the stream.
Sure.
So, for example, I remember doing a training day quite a while back when the Z6s hadn't really hit the shelves, but the Z7s were around. We were in a secret nuclear bunker, which is not very secret. And
that was awesome.
And I think I had the only Z6 of the hundreds of
Yeah.
Z7s.
I think I had Z7 that day,
And I was trying to understand that the autofocus system is very different. So if you haven't shot with a Z system before and you're going from a DSLR to a Z, it's almost, there's a bit of a learning curve
100%,
on how to use it.
And when we were, at the school, when we do our courses on like Z series stuff, we're really open about that.
Yeah.
That there is a learning curve. You can't just pick it up and expect it to work like your D750, your D810, your D800, your D850 did.
Yeah.
Because all of the modes are different. The implementation is different. So there is that little bit of learning curve of learning as to what mode you need to be in for what style of photography you're shooting.
Right.
And so with the Z6 IIs, Z6 II and the Z7 II, there's new modes that just weren't available in Z6 and Z7. So it just means that you can be in the right mode for the right style of photography you're trying to shoot, right?
Right. So in that respect, it should be easier from a user viewpoint. Okay, brilliant. Now there was a question about the AF point color change. It's a really obscure question.
Yeah, I know the question. This is something that's been asked since like the launch of Z6 and Z7.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So
this one came from Simon.
This one actually came from Simon
Stafford,
who wasn't able to join us this afternoon because of other commitments, but he did send me some questions.
Sure.
You'll probably notice which one is they're like super technical.
He emails me some questions as well.
I'm sure.
So the key, my key understanding is, and the way that I try to explain it to everybody as to why this is the case. So for those of you that might not know what Simon's effectively talking about, is you have, when you're in AFS, the camera goes from red to green to signify you've locked focus.
Yes.
And when you move to AFC, that doesn't occur.
Right.
And, a lot of people feel like they need some sort of confirmation. They feel like they need the box to go green to confirm it's locked focus. And a couple of reasons as to why that doesn't happen. So when you're in AFC, technically the camera's always continuously focusing. Technically it doesn't actually lock. It's just, when you're in AFS and it goes green, it doesn't move. It doesn't refocus. If you take the subject out of focus, it's still green.
Yeah.
It looks at the same distance.
Exactly. So if it was to go green when it locks in AFC, what you'd end up with is a box that constantly flickers between red and green.
Yeah.
And I find that massively distracting. You can actually get your Z to do that.
Okay.
If you go to manual focus and turn manual focus assist on, just as the manual focus comes into focus, the box will flicker red and green.
Oh, I see.
And it's quite distracting.
Yeah, sure.
So that's my scenario as to why that's never been implemented.
Okay, and that would be the same case to your knowledge
with these as well. These do that same thing.
Yeah,
as well.
That makes sense. Okay.
I mean, as with anything, that could change, but I don't think it will.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then in terms of the IAF has been an interesting point. I think you mentioned it on one of your videos on how the area mode, you get IAF in the wide area mode now?
Yeah. So one of the big things is when you just had a Z6 and Z7, you were always limited to just using auto area to get face tracking and eye detect. And if you wanted to switch it between animals and humans, you had to go into the menu and change a setting in there. So this is what I was talking about in terms of like the implementation of autofocus has changed. So now not only can you just quickly switch between auto area for humans and animals, that's just an option you can switch between, but you can also now use eye detect and face detect in wide area large.
Right.
So wide area large is the only option that's had that added to it. You can't do that in like wide area small or dynamic. They're still the same.
Sure.
But wide area large has the ability to now track eyes and track faces.
Which is like, it's about a box 2/3 of the
so
the
the key idea behind that was that if you're using auto area and you have like a subject on the left and you know, I do care about you, but if I didn't care about you from a photography point of view, I could use wide area large and I know it's only going to look at you, it's not going to look at you.
But what if I have a big face? Like,
can't have your big face.
No, one of the question was actually, is the wide area still looks at the closest subject in the frame?
So when it comes to wide area large, what will happen is as soon as your subject comes closer into the frame, it will automatically just switch to eye tracking and face tracking. You have no choice.
Right.
As they get further away, it will just focus on whatever else is in the scene. So if they were to walk away and out of the scene, it would then just focus on what it wants. And then it'll obviously be based on where it wants to focus on depth. It's not necessarily prioritizing anything over anything else, but what I would say is as soon as somebody walks into the frame, it prioritizes that person that's in the box rather than outside the box.
And Igor asked on the comments if the distance of the IAF has increased in terms of sensitivity.
So that would probably be something that I wouldn't know until we get production units.
Fair enough.
In all honesty, from one thing I have seen is it does look like it has.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to say yes or no directly until we get a production.
Until we have an actual
Let's say if you have to choose between wide area and a small area, would you still choose small area for speed of focus?
Depends on the subject.
Yep.
So like I talked about using the right area mode for the subject that you have, right? So for me, wide area small, I quite like wide area small for some of the wildlife stuff that I shoot. And I often find that if you're trying to shoot like a bird in a tree, wide area large is too big.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's just going to pick up on the branches and in the trees and things like that.
So speaking of animal tracking, how many species do you have in the database?
So officially it's still just for cats and dogs, right? That's not changed. So the official wording is still that it's eye autofocus for cats and dogs.
It works on rabbits too.
Yeah, so unofficially, it works on other animals. You know,
I want to get a pirate to sit on my and a hat.
Unofficially, I have seen it work on other animals, but we don't want to say, it will continuously work on those because
just because it hasn't been tested, or you don't know for sure it hasn't been actually configured for that.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask you, and that's kind of more of a discussion point, but we kind of one of the question was about 3D tracking, what equivalent of the 3D tracking in that system, and like if you can just elaborate on that.
So obviously for 3D tracking is something that's been in Nikon DSLRs for a long period of time, right? And it's a mode that you either really love it or you really don't like it at all. I've met photographers that swear by 3D tracking, and I've met Nikon photographers that can't stand it. I think some people don't like the idea that the point will just move on its own accord. But we are obviously seeing that with the move to mirrorless, that more and more people are wanting modes that do the hard work for them and follow subjects and things like that. So there isn't officially a 3D. It's not called 3D tracking.
Yeah.
So it isn't 3D tracking, but there is a subject tracking.
Yeah.
Which is very similar. But when you're using subject tracking, you have to be in auto area. So you effectively turn your camera to auto area, and you can then enable subject tracking. Now, originally, when you had the first Z6s and Z7s, that subject tracking was you had to press OK, then you had to put the box on the subject, and then it obviously followed the subject, right? But now, and this is the same for Z6 and Z7, obviously with their firmware updates, they changed the implementation of subject tracking. And that implementation change is still obviously the same as it is in Z6.2 and Z7.2, that the fact that you can assign that to a button and it works more like 3D tracking. So if I was to put that subject tracking on a subject and the subject darts to the left, it will track it to the left. But if I then let go, the button can reset back to the center.
That's really good.
So it's replaceable and you know where it will go back to.
Yeah.
And that depends on how you want it to work. So you can either have it do that or you can just basically...
So it's user configurable.
Yeah.
I probably ought to do that. Is that with the new firmware update on the Z6 as well?
Yeah, so ever since like firmware 3 with like Z6, you can assign that to a function button.
Right.
So even if you're in auto area, you didn't have to press OK. You could just press like function 1 and it'd pop up.
Yeah, I need to do that. That would be very helpful.
Any comments on that, by the way?
There were, Igor says, AF improvement awesome or semi-awesome, but I think...
One thing I would say is I've done a lot of work around testing subject tracking, and the subject tracking in the new cameras looks great.
Okay, good.
So,
definitely see improvement there.
I do like subject tracking now.
That's excellent. I mean, there's quite a few sort of, it's like less relevant to this particular topic on autofocus, but some people are talking about GPS, and why you don't have GPS units.
Well, let me ask you the last question on the autofocus, and then we move on to other things.
Sure,
but so D6, the DSLR that they have, the
DSLRs. Yeah.
So they've introduced in continuous mode, they introduced different tracking modes. So you now have line tracking, let's say for pinpoint style shoot, let's say, or you can do square or rectangle type of tracking.
You've got almost like a T-shaped one.
Yeah.
You've got
all sorts of different patterns.
Create your own boxes and all sorts.
Exactly. So do you think that will potentially come, can come into, this release or future releases, or can come via firmware update? Because obviously lots of it nowadays is software thing.
Into DSLRs or into Zs?
No, into Zs. What's your opinion about that?
So a couple of things that, obviously the D6 is using a completely separate focusing sensor.
Of course, absolutely.
So it's not on sensor phase detection. That means that we're in a completely different scenario when it comes to processing and software and so on. But it is nice to have the flexibility of you choosing your own area.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that you'd have to keep in mind is that because it's in a D6, it's seen as a feature that's designed for a pro photographer, a pro sport photographer.
It's got a price tag on it.
For example, that isn't in a D850, for example. So it is something that's kept for the higher end market of cameras. I wouldn't be able to say whether or not we'd see that in a future firmware update. I mean, I'm sure the possibility is there, but I wouldn't, go and buy one.
Of course.
Just for the thought that might happen, if that makes sense.
Just in case it might, yeah.
Watch this space.
Exactly. There's a couple of questions which kind of go into our next segment here. Thank you very much, Barra, for your contribution to in this case, the Dumbbell Fund. That's quite a useful one.
Oh, I need some dumbbells.
That's excellent. Thank you. And there's a few people who are watching from Jackson, Mississippi.
Wow.
And I know for far reaches of the world. And there was someone else. Oh, and St. Paul, Minnesota. So hello to James and also to Ronald. All right. So in terms of firmware updates, this is actually a question that I thought of and then forgot to write down.
Sure.
If there are firmware updates for the 6.2 and the 7.2 in the future, do you think that they will also have certain firmware updates for the existing models? Will there be things added to the existing models still?
Yeah, so I still think that we're going to see firmware updates for both models. I don't think they're going to be the same though.
Sure.
So there's obviously going to be certain things that are added to the new models and certain things that will be added to the older models, bug fixes and so on and things like that. So I still think that yes, you'll see firmware updates for both sets.
Yeah.
One key thing is that you can it's not like Nikon is stopping the manufacturing of Z6 and Z7. They're still available. So there's still going to be support for those. For the right photographer, I think that a Z6 and Z7 is a perfect camera. And not everybody needs to have the Z6 II and Z7 II.
Sure.
So it's obviously important for those customers that they still see firmware updates.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll still see firmware updates. Whether or not they're different or the same, I have no idea.
There was just one last week, I think. There was fixes, There
was. Yeah. Oh, did the fix for the other one come
310
out?
and 311 got fixed by 312.
Yeah,
and there was some other thing as well. But I agree with you. It's always good to have different price points for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one more subject on tracking, but Ronald says he's happy with his Z6 and D5. So how much closer to maybe the D5 with the 6.2?
If you can put a number on it.
He said you're not asking for percentage.
No. It's difficult to say.
Yeah.
Especially without seeing like a production unit, right? So
yeah, of course.
Mainly because of the changes we've seen. A really good example of that is the changes made in the original Z6 from firmware 1 to firmware 3.
Yes.
You know,
it was a massive
difference, right? So, you know, the changes that we could see from what the pre-production firmware is right now to what the final firmware is can be quite big. So one thing I would say is, you know, if you're already happy with the Z6, it's not going to go backwards.
No.
So if you're always happy with your Z6, you know, there is going to be improvements. It's going to be easier for you to, you know, make use of that autofocusing system by changing through different modes and so on.
Sure. So, are you just trying out the 1.2?
Gorgeous.
It is very beautiful.
It's a lovely lens.
For how long can you leave this equipment with us?
About 2 hours.
No, okay. I'm going to make the stream last as long as possible today.
It's an 8-hour stream, guys.
Right, so we can
get ready for it. Yeah, brace yourself.
Thank you very much, Gary, for your contribution to the coffee fund. I think if we do run over an hour, I will have to get a coffee midstream so that I can keep talking.
I can still function.
Yeah, it's quite hard to do a full hour, but longer than that, and my brain switches off.
So are we moving to buffer and frames per second?
We're going to talk about buffer and frames per second. There was someone who asked a question in the comments. I've actually also got that question written down, so we will tackle those now. So first, do you know if the buffer and the frame rate, how much they diminish when you're shooting in 14-bit RAW? Because all the figures we saw were 12, right?
I know the frame rates, but I don't have official figures for buffers.
Okay.
So all of the official figures is generally based on 12-bit, which is something that, you know, Nikon's always tended to do.
Yeah.
So frame rates based on 12-bit are obviously the maximum 14 frames on the Z6, and then that 10 frames per second on a Z7.
Yeah.
Obviously Z6 II and Z7 II.
Yeah.
So when you change that down to 14-bit, the Z6 II will drop down to 9.
Okay. Oh, it's not. That's maximum. So
Yeah,
from
it's a
14 to 9.
From 14 to 9. Okay.
Which is a bigger drop than the Z7 II, because the Z7 II will drop down from 10 to 8.
Okay.
It's not bad.
That's not bad at all. Because I've got a few people who are, you know, they use a D6 or a D5, and then the Z is like their alternative camera, and they're trying to find something which is a bit closer to what
I mean, one of the things that a lot of people asked is that, oh, the Z6 II shoots 14 frames. Now that's the same as like a D6 that shoots 14 frames.
Of course.
It doesn't mean that they're the same camera. It just means, you know, just means that they can get to the same speed, right? So,
exactly.
When it comes to buffer, as I mentioned, I only have the 12-bit buffers.
Yeah.
I did do a quick test because someone asked me the same question. So this is not official in any way, shape, or form.
It's not official, guys. No, don't tweet this.
But my Z7 II did 44 shots in 14-bit RAW
instead of 77.
Without JPEGs or anything like that.
So that's 7 Mark II.
Yeah. That was without any JPEG. It was on an XQD card.
Yeah.
So.
And do you think that CF Express will speed things up or increase the buffer
I'd like to
size?
think so, but it's not something I've tried. I don't actually have a CF Express card to test at faster speeds. So
just to confirm, the figures that Nikon provided, they were provided for XQD cards, which are currently, I think, is about 400 megabytes per second, right?
Yeah, generally any figures that you've seen is XQD card based.
Okay, fair enough.
So there is a chance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. But until we know.
It's a tricky thing because I know from, for example, shooting with the D750, when I upgraded to faster cards, it didn't make any difference to the speed. It did give me a bit more time in the buffer, but it wasn't like I didn't get faster speeds out of it or anything like that. And it was really marginal because it was ultimately down to how fast the camera could write.
Exactly.
Rather than the speed of the card. Yeah. So I guess if Nikon had been using XQD cards to provide the figures, it's not going to make a huge difference if you put a CF Express card.
Yeah, I mean, what we don't know is we don't know how fast the camera can write just now. So I generally don't know until we try it.
Yeah,
so
sure.
There's always going to be stuff that
We've got a CF Express card upstairs.
Yeah, we can just bring it down. Why won't you do that?
Try it live.
Yeah.
Well, the current CF Express cards can write at 800 megabytes per second, while XQDs are about 400 megabytes per second.
Sure.
So I guess, if the camera can ride that speed, then we will see potentially more
shots. A bigger buffer. That would be
a
fun test. I don't think we will do it live. We've got enough to do. Might try it off camera a bit later, though, and then let you know. Thank you very much, Richard, for your contribution to the Coffee Fund in Norwegian krona, which I never work out. I think it's about £10. So thank you very, very much. Now, Marius asked... Oh, that's a video question, actually. Marius, I'm going to keep that one for later. and write it down in a second.
Well, while you're looking for it, I can check with the extended shutter speed.
Yeah.
We have a question. So 780 and has extended shutter speed, and that's been confirmed that the new cameras will have extended shutter speed up to 900 seconds. Now the question was, will it be available in aperture priority and shutter speed priority? I know it's available in manual mode, but 780 can't shoot an aperture priority or shutter speed priority.
No, and that's the same case with the Z6 II and the Z7 II.
What's the limitation of it? Why, let's say, can't be implemented? Let's say, at least in shutter speed, why can't I set, let's say, 900 of a second? Is it light meter? Is it something else? That's
I probably wouldn't say it's a limitation. It's more just of a design choice. I think the key thing is that those modes are built in for convenience when you want to shoot a longer shutter speed over 30 seconds. And the key thing is that the meter will still work to 30 seconds, and anything past that, it's not metered. So it's you're still choosing the shutter speed that you want. And it's in the menu. It actually tells you when you activate it in the menu. It says manual mode only.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like if that was in aperture priority because they're not metered, it just wouldn't use them anyway.
Yeah.
And if you're in shutter priority, well, you've never really been able to do even like time and bulb in shutter priority.
Yeah.
Because it's just designed for controlling shutter speed within the metered parameters. So really, it's a manual thing, and I'd probably say that realistically, somebody that wants to use those longer shutter speeds, they're using filters. They're they know what their setup is, so they're probably shooting manual anyway.
Yeah.
That particular feature is something that I've been crying out for years. So I am so glad that it's in the camera in any proportion at all.
Any form at all. Yeah, absolutely. With this extended shutter speed, will they ever give this in minutes so we can understand it better? Do you do maths, Andy?
I always carry a calculator with me.
Yeah.
Not the phone one, the real one.
Oh, you're like a real
obviously.
Casio
Exactly.
or something.
One great thing is that when you are using them, they do count down. So it's not like you're on your own.
Yeah.
It's not just like you choose 900 seconds and it just starts firing.
And it shows on the top screen of the camera,
It does show on the top
isn't it?
screen, yeah. So the top screen will show you a countdown as you're shooting.
So it's 900 seconds, put it on, go grab a coffee, come back, the shot is taken.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you don't have to technically work out the minutes, right?
No. Now, there was someone who, I'm going to just go back to an earlier question John asked, which is kind of to do with, it's not necessarily the buffer specifically, but he said, can you shoot RAW and then choose your size of JPEG side by side? Because he shoots with a Z7, but also D50, D500, and a whole bunch of other cameras. I've never actually tried to shoot RAW plus JPEG. I just don't use it.
Well, JPEG has 3 types of compressions. Is that what he's referring to?
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, you can have a different size for JPEG and RAW files.
There you go, John. Just got to play with the menus.
That was the same on previous models, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a few people send questions, which I didn't think about until they asked them, and actually, it's features that exist in the Z6 and Z7, which they obviously just haven't accessed yet.
Yes,
so for those people,
there's already a lot of stuff in the original models, right? So and you just don't know about it until you use it.
And then someone brings it up on a stream or on a video, and you think, oh, I wonder if the new camera does that. But the existing cameras do it too. So that's good to know. Now, Major Jiffy, I think that's correct. Major Jiffy says, just join the stream, but if you're after a DSLR, would you recommend a D500 against a D780? I'm a bit concerned about buying a camera which is 4 years old. That's a completely random question, but I don't mind you asking
But is it Major Jiffy or Major Giffy? That's the question.
Major Jiffy.
Jiffy?
I don't know. If I said your
Still
name,
up for debate.
So that's a slightly disrelated question, and we actually did a live stream on the subject of what DSLR you should buy a few weeks ago. So I recommend you watch that. But just as like a snap answer, what would you say?
My response is always depends on what you shoot.
Yeah.
So if you do wildlife, it'd probably still be a D500 because you get the 153-point focusing system.
Yeah.
If you shoot like low light, landscape, portraiture, probably be a D780. Right. If you're interested in video, definitely D780.
Yes, I would agree with that.
But yeah, for things like wildlife and sports, D500.
Fantastic.
Excellent. There you go. There's your answer. So.
Are we moving on towards video?
Are we? Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
The things we don't understand.
It's not my favourite topic.
Yes.
The things we don't understand.
Oh, I just.
How many streams have you done now?
No, it's not.
Still have no idea what we're doing. So yeah.
We just turn the camera on and pray.
And just hope that it works. It'll work.
This is more to do with the subject of things like ProRes, RAW, and stuff that I don't use. So go ahead, Con. You fire away. I put you on the spot.
All right. Let me read this question. Okay, so Becky read somewhere that there's a crop factor at 4K 60p
Sure.
of 1.2. Is this handleable via firmware update to eliminate the crop? Because previous cameras didn't have the crop at 30 frames per second at 4K.
Sure.
So
to be clear,
yeah,
Z7 II
Yeah.
shoots 4K 30 and 4K 60 out of the box
Okay.
straight away.
With no crop factor.
No.
Well, okay.
the result is bad. Read the terms and conditions.
So Z7 II,
Yeah.
right? So you'll be able to do 4K 60 out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
It applies the 16:9 crop, and there is a small field of view crop. So you're basically looking at about a 93% field of view, which works out at about 1.07 crop.
Yeah.
If you were to round it up, it's a 1.1 times crop.
Yeah.
Which is completely normal.
Because it's basically widescreen, isn't it? It's
so it's obviously a 16:9, but then, so there is a slight crop towards the left and right edges. You know, that's not anything I'd ever worry about.
No.
Z6 II.
Yeah.
That obviously cannot shoot 4K 60 out of the box. That would require a firmware update that's been announced to be arriving in February. And the Z6 II, when it records in 4K 60, will have a DX 1.5 times crop.
Interesting.
It won't be full frame.
But 30p will still be
30p
full
is
frame.
fine. Yeah.
Good old 30p.
As same as the Z6. Okay. And in terms of the raw video upgrade, which is for the Z6 II, is that still you pay for that service from Nikon?
Yeah. So if you were to buy just one out of the box, you'd still need to technically send that away to have to Nikon UK for it to have the raw upgrade applied.
Yeah.
The key reasoning behind that is that it's still seen as like an added feature, as an added benefit. So not everybody that needs a Z6 II is going to need ProRes RAW, right? So,
and you still need to get an external recorder
100%.
like Atomos Ninja 5 or something else.
100%.
Yeah, okay.
So one thing on the external recorder front, obviously with Z6 and Z7 currently, if you're using an external recorder, it's generally Atomos, and you're using the Atomos ProRes RAW. But with Z6 II and Z7 II, and I'm not sure if this will also become for Z6 and Z7, I'm not sure about that, but there'll be added support for Blackmagic. View Assist, so Blackmagic external recorders, and also Blackmagic RAW.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So kind of expanding as well.
Yeah.
But again, that's not till February.
No,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
I would also like to point out, because a few people said, well, why is this a chargeable thing? I don't know any other brand that upgrades ProRes RAW in their cameras without charging.
Panasonic, I think around GH4 time, they used to charge for updates as well.
And I believe Sony also do it as well. Actually, I'm not 100% sure. But I know there's a few other brands that do charge for that service. So it's not like a completely off-the-wall thing.
I mean, and obviously, if you just wanted to have an external recorder and you weren't really interested in ProRes RAW, you'd still be able to shoot N-Log 10-bit externally. And you can also shoot now in the new cameras in HLG, so HDR, hybrid log gamma, without having to pay anything extra other than the external recorder.
Okay.
That's really good.
It's the ProRes RAW side of things that's the extra.
Excellent. So that actually leads me to the next question. So do they shoot 4K 60 internal or external?
Internal only.
Internal only.
Yes.
Okay.
So Atomos can't do 60p at 4K.
So we won't output to 4K 60, if that makes sense. So 4K 60 is internal.
So you shoot with Atomos, you go 4K 30 or max. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And it's 10-bit. No,
when you're external,
yes,
you can shoot 10-bit.
Okay.
When you're internal, it's 8-bit.
Do you have any data on the bit rates or anything that
so
for internal shooting?
I do. I'm trying to remember what the bit rate was.
I'm writing this down because I get asked and I kind of
sure. So the bit rate when you're recording internally for 4K 30 is the same as it is across the vast majority of our cameras that record 4K, which is 144 megabits per second.
Right.
Megabits.
The new bit rate for the I only have the bit rate for the Z7 II, which will record in 4K 60, is 300 and something megabits per second.
Oh, that's really good.
I'm dying to try and remember what the second digit is, but I don't want to say it wrong, but I know it's 300 and something.
300
but I think it's much better than previous generation as well.
Yeah. So a lot of people who said, the Z6 is the video camera, the Z7 is not the video camera. Is that kind of the lines have been blurred a bit with the Mark II?
No. So obviously, I don't want to cause any confusion, but the Z6 II would still be my choice for video.
Okay.
The reason that the Z6 II has to crop is because in 4K 60, it's offering you a pixel readout.
Right.
Z7 II isn't doing that.
Right.
So you will still get better picture quality and better video quality from a Z6 II.
Okay.
Okay, so video for me is still Z6 and Z6B.
I hope everyone is tracking. If you have any questions regarding video, please post them.
Email Richie, ask him on his channel.
Post them word for word, because I will read exactly what you say. I won't be able to make it my own paraphrase.
I think we're done with video.
I think so. I'm just having a look. Someone's asking about illuminated buttons. That kind of leads us into the general questions segment. But do you think? I mean, I was quite surprised that there weren't illuminated buttons in this.
You've got to think about what cameras we've previously put illuminated buttons in the past, and also the original Z6 and Z7. Their original design was to be as small and as lightweight but still ergonomic as possible.
Yeah.
So if you look at illuminated buttons, it's D850, it's D500, D6,
Z9.
So I don't think it's that for that category. You've never seen illuminated buttons in like a 750 or a 780, right?
Sure.
So have you done Lego? Have you built Lego?
Do I build Lego? I build Lego.
Okay, so you can buy, if you build a Porsche, you can buy LED lights that you can put inside.
Yeah.
Is it something you can do with Z series cameras?
I wouldn't recommend taking your own camera apart.
You can avoid your warranty for.
With Constantine's advice, you can avoid your warranty.
If you want to do whatever you want to do with your cameras.
Sure. Don't open your cameras.
No.
Don't open your camera inside. Okay, so that was a very good question. Thank you, Blue Serpent Media. Now, will Nikon add a no compression option in the menu? As currently there's either loss or lossless. As opposed to uncompressed.
We do have uncompressed rule. Okay. If he's talking about stills.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so
yes, Andy, it's there.
Uncompressed rule has been available for a long time.
That's what I thought, but I wonder, maybe Andy, you're using an older camera?
Z50 doesn't have uncompressed.
Potential. I don't know if Andy has a Z camera.
Does depend on what camera body you have.
So just to show, we've got Nephro recording, and you got lossless.
Yeah. And the yellow one that you can't see is uncompressed, but it is honest.
Uncompressed rule has been something that we're quite good at, actually. Across a lot of our bodies.
Every camera that I've had for a long time has had uncompressed as an option.
Oh, yeah. I always shoot uncompressed. I've got plenty of space on my hard drive.
So much space, a few extra terabytes of hard drive space.
So let's move on to general questions. Quick question. How do I get the second battery out? So I managed to figure out how to get the first one. So what did you do with the second? There's no door on this side.
So there's no door on that side because obviously we have buttons and 4 dials on this grip.
Right.
But you'll notice that there's 2 little sliders. So you basically have the yellow one which removes just the battery, and then the grey one removes the entire insert.
That's smart.
So the insert will hold 2 batteries. And you can see there's 2 little battery connectors because they'll run independently, so they don't have to run through each other, which means that the one slot on this side is hot swappable.
Right.
So you can hot swap one, but not the second one. So on previous, you had 2 doors, so you can kind of swap them independently.
So what you would do is if you had 2 batteries, you'd have one in here that would be like your permanent, and then this one would be the one you could swap.
Can you select which one is the main one, or
it will always default to this one?
Okay, that's good because then the second one is the backup, which you can't remove.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Is there a battery also inside the camera?
No.
Okay.
No.
So the grip goes on in the same kind of L shape as the.
Yeah, the actual connections for the grip are on the inside of the.
So this was something that I'd spotted in the release where there were contacts inside the camera so that the button functionality would work.
There was a couple of people that panicked because there's no contacts here. But they're in the.
They're inside there, so that makes sense. And then in terms of the grip compatibility, does the grip fit on the older bodies?
I mean, technically, it will fit.
But you won't get button functionality.
No.
Will you get power though?
I've not tried that.
Patini, can we get second-hand Z series cameras, please?
We could try it, but it's not something you'd want to do. You'd go and buy the grip for the
other one.
Yeah,
but it won't explode if you put it on.
I'm sure it won't explode.
Well, if it doesn't, no Z camera. To that side. Yeah. We're going to try the grip live.
And vice versa, can you put MBN10 into the second generation Z?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
And then you get the same functionality as previously?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah. So I still use that because I use it as a charger. So I use it as a dual battery charger.
So you just plonk it, stick the USB cable in.
Yeah, I carry, like a USB-C Mac charger.
Yeah.
I carry that around with me.
That kind of charges everything.
Yeah.
That's very, very, very useful.
Yeah.
So you'll see it here first. This was one thing that I wanted to check for quite a long time because I had quite a few people ask if the new grip would work with the older bodies. Obviously not the button functionality, but I think it's more a point of if you're going to buy a second generation camera, and a new grip, and you've got an older body with no grip, like can you use them essentially?
I don't think you can because it's not supplying power.
It's not working.
Here we go. Only on Grace Westminster stream.
But pre-production, right? So
yeah, you never know. You never know.
But it's kind of
it wouldn't make sense anyway if that way, because you would just buy the other power pack rather than the grip, right?
Sure. So if it's not supplying cam,
I mean, if you want it to look really nice, you could just sit it on a desk. But
it just looks professional.
It's not supplying any power. So
there you have it.
I'm going to say no.
So no is the answer. You can't use the MBN11 on the Z6 or Z7. No. It's for the Mark II versions. The MBN10 though, did you say that would work
that
on?
Does it.
Yeah, so that will power, but obviously you've got no buttons. So
there we go. That's supply power straight away. So it's not the battery's dead or anything.
Yeah, so it is definitely the compatibility. Someone did ask if it was worth the upgrade, like does the grip make it worth it? Because there were a lot of people that were
really depends on how often you're going to shoot with a grip, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're Constantine and you shoot with a grip like all the time,
I think there's always people that are on. Oh, sorry, I can't speak. There's always people that are on either side of that.
Yeah.
There's some people I speak to and they're just like, yeah, I just do this. And like that seems second nature to them.
Me.
And the best thing, my favorite thing of all time, is when people have a grip and they do that.
Yeah.
that is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
But there are obviously people that do use it and they have the second nature of moving their hand around is what they're used to. So it is all going to come down to your photography. I do like the slightly chunkier body with longer lenses. So when it comes to wildlife and things like that, obviously you've got a second battery in there, so you get better battery life.
Yeah.
But it's not like it makes the camera shoot any faster or anything like that.
No, it doesn't add frames per second or anything like that.
No, so I think it really comes down to your photography style.
I just remember one person shot like this, and they said, "Well, it feels like a Hasselblad."
Sure. I mean, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. So a couple of more general questions. Sam asks why micro SD cards haven't been incorporated because they're much smaller, and why.
Yeah, I think micro SD, and this isn't, this is just my own opinion really. I think micro SD being such a smaller system makes sense in a smaller camera.
Sure.
But we've got the space for it. We've got the size for XPD cards.
It's going so well.
We've got the size for XPD cards and SD cards. So it's not a medium that I would personally want to use.
No.
Unless it was in a smaller, really small camera.
Like the J5s with their little micro SDs and the V3s, those were little diddy cameras. I mean, even the Z50, there's nothing, if you wanted a second card slot, you could be like really off the wall and have SD and micro SD because then it keeps the form factor nice and small. But that makes sense. I tend to lose micro SD cards. That's why I don't like them. They're so little.
Yeah,
so there you go, Sam. Now, Ganesh B asks, why can't Nikon incorporate assigning AF on plus AF area mode to a custom button like on the D500 D850?
Sure.
Is that something that, I mean...
It's not been added.
Okay.
I've looked for that.
Okay.
So this is a common request.
Right.
That I've been asked. I don't have a proper answer as to why that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that we've only ever really had in things like D5s, D6s, D850s.
Sort of pro body.
Yeah, so it's a setting that, there's always something, if you know Nikon menus really well, there's always settings that are reserved for pro bodies.
Yes.
And I don't know what the choice procedure is of that and anything like that, but it could be something that could be added. But right now, the new cameras don't have that or don't add that.
You have to pay extra for those menus.
But by the way, folks, if you want to see what the menus have been added to the new Z cameras, definitely have a look at Richard's video, the last video.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. I watched myself today, and that was amazing. Again, I'm talking to the laptop and not to the camera. But another thing is, can you lock the focusing point in the middle? Is there any button that's you have on all DSLRs, and unfortunately they didn't have it on Z-series cameras?
Yeah, so again, there's not like a lock switch on the dial. You can lock shutter speed and aperture, but you can't technically lock the point. You can obviously turn the touchscreen off if you're
that's
worried
what I
about
do at the moment.
activating it by touchscreen, but if you still move the trigger, it's still going to move. If that makes sense.
I mean, I tend to the OK button, returning the point to the middle. I use that constantly.
Yeah, that's what my OK is set to.
It's like forever just resetting it to the middle and then moving it if I need to. Sure. But a lot of people obviously were accustomed to having a locked focus point so they don't accidentally push it.
Well, my nose is too big. I just go in there and
then you
just
move
moves.
the focus.
To be really honest, the main feedback that we got was that the lock switch was confusing.
Oh, okay.
And that actually people locked their focus points and then didn't know why they weren't moving.
Yeah,
that's
we've
true.
had
That's
that.
a common
We've
question
had that
we've been asked.
question.
Yeah.
It's funny. Sam says left-eyed, so I turn the camera. Me too, Sam. I turn the camera that way because honestly, if I have a grip, it feels so awkward to shoot like this.
Shoot across the
feels
camera
like.
frame.
Yeah. So for me, it makes more sense to do it that way around. Does the Type C of the ENEL 15s work in the older pack?
It does.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. In terms of powering,
but without
USB,
functionality of the new one.
Yeah, so it's not like you can. So yeah, okay. So the batteries will work. You can still use the batteries. You will get the increased capacity, so your battery life becomes better.
Yeah.
But you don't all of a sudden gain the ability to have the camera on and charge at the same time. That is a function of the new bodies or a Z5.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very useful feature of the Z5 as well because you can just use it and charge at the same time, or film. It was one thing. Funnily enough, I had a photographer who was shooting video on the D850 with the grip on, and he ran out of battery halfway through the shoot and was like, why can't I just take my battery out of the grip? Why does it stop recording?
Yeah.
And I never really thought about the use of hot swapping batteries until he had that specific problem.
And that's why when you look at the grip, the data around the grip is that it gives you 1.9 times better battery life rather than 2 times because you're using 2 batteries. But that obviously that extra 10% is in the hot swapping feature.
It's in like keeping the camera going.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
Speaking of the battery life, can you just talk a little bit more about the energy saving features that have been introduced with new models? Yeah,
so there's a particular energy saving mode. This isn't new to Z6 II and Z7 II. It was added like Z5, other Z cameras have it. It's just the original Z6 and Z7 don't have it. So the energy saving mode is basically just an on or off, and it's only applicable in stills. So you can't use it in video. It doesn't do anything in video. So when you're in stills, what it will do is it changes how quickly your camera goes into standby. But when it goes into standby, it drops the frame rate of the viewfinder in the screen. So if you were to actively move the camera around whilst it was in that standby mode, you would see the frame rate would be like 10 frames per second.
The Z50 does that?
It does, yeah.
I've seen it because I use it.
So I don't use the X cameras. In your opinion, has it improved the battery performance?
I'd probably say that I've been shooting with these like day to day, and it's been a situation where I can shoot with them and then put the batteries on charge, and then shoot with them and put the batteries on charge. So it's not like I've done any outright, extended shooting with them. And it's not a feature that I've had on in my camera, but I think it's really designed for people that, the photographers who shoot with their cameras all day, they bring their camera down to their side and they don't turn it off. And then, it's designed for people to do that. Whereas I have a habit of every time I put my camera down, I turn it off.
Yeah.
And I can't stop that habit. And it actually causes me quite serious problems.
You pick it up and you're like, oh no, I didn't turn it on.
I do the same. It's just,
So because I shoot a lot of long exposures, I sometimes use long exposure noise reduction.
Yeah.
I pick my camera up and I turn it off and I'm like,
I've
just stopped the long exposure noise reduction.
Right.
So, I think it's designed for people who just drop their cameras, pick them back up again, and have them work like that. So,
yeah, exactly. Okay, so now interesting question on the processors. Now you have dual processors. Does this allow much more scope for extra feature additions through firmware upgrades?
Yeah. So this is something that again is like in theory, again, going back to what I mentioned about how we've implemented changes just for the original Z6 and Z7 over time.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're going to be able to add more and more stuff to Z6 II, Z7 II. What those things are,
don't know yet.
We don't know.
But the potential is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, excellent. Now, there's a few people asking about speed lights and flash and things like that. So,
speaking of which, WR11. Yeah. Shall we talk about that?
Let's talk about that as well.
You're gonna talk about that, right? Because it's very confusing. So WR11 came out. This has been announced, but we actually, like, the way it's been described is quite confusing. So could you just talk what's the difference between the previous model and this one?
Sure.
And is there any compatibility issues or anything like this we need to know?
There's not any compatibility issues that I'm aware of, but I've not tested it with everybody. So the key thing now is if you want to show them to the camera, there's two different units.
It's not going to refocus because we've got so many faces in the picture, but it's okay. You get the idea. That's what they look like.
There's two different units, and so obviously previously with the WR10 sets, you bought both the adapter, the trigger, and the remote,
and the transceiver,
and everything basically worked together. And if you needed the 10-pin adapter, you used the 10-pin adapter. If you didn't need the 10-pin adapter, you just didn't use the adapter, right? So now you have two separate units. So you have one that's based on just a standard Nikon connection, and then you have one that's a 10-pin connection. So you only buy the unit that you need.
And these are entirely backwards compatible.
Yeah.
So you don't need 3 parts anymore, but you have to choose either or depending on which model you use.
So the only downside is if, some people have said they shoot with like D850 and Z6.
That's me.
That's,
Well, I've got the old one, so I'm okay. But...
Sure.
But in terms of what do you know what's changed about them?
Internally, no.
No. Okay, fair enough.
Do you know what happened to WR10? Why it disappeared from the shelf for 1 or 2 years?
The key thing was there was quite a serious issue at the factory.
Okay.
So,
Fair enough. We figured it was something to do with manufacturing, but
I think they lost a whole factory. So
Oops, they just vanished.
It was quite
went to UK.
So
we had a waiting.
That's why there was a couple that came through again because they could manufacture them again, and then obviously I think the easiest thing was that they basically made a new improved version of it. So,
sure.
Is there a new protocol being used, a new maybe transceiver? So is the connection better compared to the previous model? The radio connection.
Based on the tests that I've been doing, so I've just been using with SB5000s.
Yeah.
They seem to be the same distance, and working just as well as they did with kind of the old SB5000s. And I've been perfectly happy with them. In terms of actual technical, I've not seen anything that suggests that this has been specifically improved and so on and things like that. But I think they're going to be dual use, so it's not just for the speedlight side of things. It's also people who want to trigger multiple cameras.
Yeah, exactly, because you can fire multiple cameras.
Are we going to see more flash updates just to to get the radio compatibility with the new triggers? So at the moment it's SB5000 only. Will we see something like SB700 potential upgrade in the future? Or
I mean, there's always the possibility of that. Obviously, I can't talk about future stuff. But,
no, sure.
But that's going to happen after the show.
We'll talk about that off the record.
But you get the idea that if SB5000 is our current speedlight setting.
So if you can put a number on the flash model, which one would be 5 or 7?
So an SB5000 or
no 500 or 700?
If you were going to upgrade one, you mean? Well, that's a really weird question. If you were going to put all
right, SB300 will be upgraded first, and then 500 and 700.
In terms of putting radio trigger compatibility in, because I don't use big flashes. I
do.
I know.
Which one would you want to upgrade first?
The 700
because it's cheaper. Yeah, it's
just feedback for you.
All right. Rishi nodded, so that's happening.
Right.
I'll take it as a yes.
No, the reason that I say that is because the 500, as cute a little flash as it is, you do have to get quite creative when you want to diffuse it and stuff, and it's great. It's got the LEDs. I use LED panels. It's much easier to do that.
Sure.
But whereas for speedlight functionality, I personally don't need an SB5000.
No.
For anything. I use 600s, 700s. They're great, but all my cameras are now becoming radio triggered, and then all my old kit is going to be completely obsolete. So that's my gripe for today.
You know what grind my gears?
No, but in terms of speedlight functionality and using them with speedlights, has anything really changed over the older models?
It's not really anything that's changed. All the existing compatibility would be there like you would expect, right?
Yeah.
So, it's the usual being able to use either radio triggers. You can still make use of line of sight triggers with SU800.
Yeah.
Or using a second speedlight and things like that as well.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a couple of extra flash functions you can assign to function buttons.
Okay.
So if you want to see your group options on a function button, you can do that.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're generally going to have all the compatibility that you would expect.
Okay, there we go. I can't remember who asked me that question about Flash. There was a couple of people, but hopefully that answers your questions. If you do have more questions about Flash, just fire away. I'm just going to scroll back here because Mohammed was asking about autofocus performance with the FTZ. Now he was specifically asking about the Z5 and the FTZ as well as the I guess the 6.2 and the 7.2. We can kind of remark on that, but I noticed when using, for example, the D850 with a 500 PF and then putting a Z6 FTZ 500 PF, it would take almost twice as long to get through the focus range from infinity to closest focus or vice versa than on the D850.
From one side to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So you can't really test it in the field that way. But if you just stick them on a desk and press the button, then
I think one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that when a D850 racks focus from one point to another point, what mode were you in?
I don't know. Okay. AFC single point. Probably.
So one of the things that Z cameras do is they choose whether or not they want to use phase or contrast.
Right.
They can use both at the same time. They can swap between them. There's only one mode that is contrast on its own.
Thank you.
Which is pinpoint. So pinpoint is only so pinpoint will always be slower.
Yeah.
In terms of moving the motor, when Zs are focusing, they're always looking for was that in focus. So depending on what mode, that's why I asked what mode you're in, right? Yeah. Because what a D850 might do is it will just go from one side to the other, and then it will think, oh, maybe I should have gone back because it was in focus over there.
Right.
But whereas like a Z will basically look for focus, and it doesn't, go from front to back.
Yeah.
Because it's looking for focus in the middle of the ground, and if it can't find anything, it will then focus on what it has found.
Then it keeps.
Yeah. So what my experience is if you have a subject, and the camera is going to focus from out of focus to that subject.
Yeah.
They're pretty close, and in some cases the Z will do that faster.
Yeah.
But if it's just out of focus from closest range to infinity, the Z doesn't like to just go to infinity for no reason because it's designed to find something before it hits infinity.
Right.
So that's kind of my...
That's your take on why it took
quite as long. Different algorithms, processing, focusing.
So I guess that would be the case with the Z5 as well, although it's a different... Yeah. I mean, it's same number of points as the Z6. So
the Z5 is Z6's focusing system.
Yeah. So, okay. Fair enough. So hopefully, Mohammed, that answers your question.
I mean, one thing I would say on that is the 500 PF is one of my most used lenses.
Yes, I love it.
I shoot Kingfishers in flight on Z7 with a 500 PF.
Yeah, I've seen your shots actually.
It works, right?
Are you worried about the whole mount and FTZ adapter just touching it to touch small body?
The only advice I have on that is you mount on the lens, right? So anything have support. Any weight is taken from the lens. It's not taken from the body. So yes, I'd be concerned if I had the body in a 600 and I was holding it from the body like that. That would be concerning. But
don't do that.
Yeah, it's normal common sense. So you just take the weight from the lens rather than from the body.
Yeah,
common sense.
Common
That's
sense.
very important. Yeah.
There's a few people talking about brackets actually. Before I talk about the EVF, which is also a lot of questions, but you got the Zelda on there. Is that right?
This is the Zelda. It is a three-legged thing Zelda. Those of you that know the videos that I make, they pretty much always in all of my videos.
Yeah. Just
because I love them. They work really nicely. They do what I need them to do. I don't use things like triggers and stuff like that. So,
sure. So in terms of compatibility, the Zelda still works on the 6.2 and the 7.2, but you don't have easy access to the trigger port. Is that right?
Yeah. So because this new adapter is larger, this just won't fit at all.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So. That three-legged thing are aware of that.
No, I know. I saw that.
So there might be some new model coming out for this specific camera.
Does the Ellie fit?
I've not tried Ellie, but because you can extend Ellie far enough, you could probably technically get that in behind the Ellie bracket.
My goodness, yeah.
So you could technically do that.
You could.
I've not tried that directly.
What about Thomas and Steve?
They don't have a Thomas in it.
No, I just throw a random name in there.
They have a Mike.
And they've got a Billy and a Leo.
Yeah, you could have chosen so many other names and it would have been fine.
You would have been right.
Three-legged thing. Your next release, please call it Constantine.
I said probably quite a good idea.
Difficult to spell, but sounds wonderful.
And a Becky.
We are trying to get. We're seeing if we can arrange some of these adapters to three-legged thing, so that we can figure out how they can
do like a configuration for it.
I wonder if I don't know, Nick can potentially read some sort of extension as well.
Yeah, I mean, my main concern is that you wouldn't want anything hanging out further away from your body, right?
No,
so,
that's true.
You would not. You might notice I have a coffee. I'm not being selfish. I'm just the one that needs the coffee right now. So thank you for your contribution to the coffee.
I'm running on fumes.
Are there any other L brackets for the Z system?
There's loads. There's loads of brands that make them.
Do they? They're all probably about the.
They're all obviously designed for the same fitment. They'll all have the same locking pins. But what they do vary in is how they access their port. So some of the brackets are much larger.
Right.
I've not been able to test other brackets.
Right.
So the only brackets I personally use are the
three-legged
thing ones.
Right? And they're great. So that's why.
Really good. I guess we're going to see the brackets for Z cameras with the grip as well.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now, someone was mentioning small rig actually. Andy was mentioning small rig.
Small rig do really good cages and brackets. They do a great bracket for the Z50.
Yes, I've got that one. I wonder if they will reconfigure something because Obviously, with the Z6 movie kit, there was a small rig for that. That's pretty customizable, though. You can get everything in the right place there. So you
still have it in my house.
Wouldn't need you wouldn't need a new one. Really Right Stuff. Someone was mentioning.
Yeah, Really Right Stuff makes good stuff.
Kirk. Potentially.
Kirk Industries,
There we go. And now, so I'm gonna move from the brackets question. If anyone wants to ask me any more bracket questions, that's totally fine. But on the EVF blackout, it was something that was mentioned. It's a shortened. Is it less? Is there less of a blackout?
Yeah. I can't put a number on that.
No, sure.
It's
less.
Yeah, it's less. And that obviously varies depending on your frame rate.
Yes.
So it just depends on what mode you're shooting.
Is it this?
No. So it does depend on what mode you're shooting in, and obviously if you're shooting single frame, it doesn't really matter either.
And if someone mentioned, and I'm trying to find it now, but there was a whole flurry of questions about the three-legged thing, or just statements about rigs. Is there a change in the viewfinder refresh rate? Is there a change in the refresh? No,
not the overall refresh rate. No.
I think what
I've read somewhere there was a higher refresh rate, but it could be wrong.
I think what it is it not that there's a difference between how quickly the two switch from one
so you mean switching?
In terms of, I think that's probably what they mean, but that's what I'm asking.
So there's general use case improvements.
Yeah.
And there's the camera might just feel more responsive,
right?
If that makes sense. But again, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's put a number on it and say it's this much faster.
No, sure, but like I used the Z5 for about a week, and I found that. And maybe it does it with the Z6, but I just don't notice it because I have it set on EVF all the time. But with the Z5, it was like every slight movement or shadow, it would switch over because it was very, very sensitive. So I don't know if they've changed that or improved it. There was some mention of it changing.
Yeah, I think the mention is that the actual speed at which it switches between them is better.
Okay, so you don't have that slight lag. And then when you switch it on, is it any faster? That's the same. Okay. Mm-hmm. Someone did ask that as well. So whoever it was, that's the answer for that question.
I had a question on fine-tuning.
AF
fine-tuning. And if you can just explain it to me in kind of very simple sentences so I can grasp on it. Okay, so why do you have to fine-tune autofocus lenses on Z cameras? So because technically, let's say if you're using native lenses, you focus on the sensor effectively. So which is effectively live view, which is supposed to give me the sharpest focusing possible. So I don't use AF processor like I would use on DSLR. So could you explain us and the audience why would you fine tune lenses on Z cameras? Is it mainly for F mount lenses, or would you do the same with Z lenses as well?
The key thing is this is a something I say to a lot of people. Just because the option's there, you don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And loads of people always say, why has it got AF fine tune? Does that mean I have to AF fine tune my lenses? It doesn't mean that you have to. No. But if we didn't put it in, there'd be somebody that would be like,
someone really upset about it.
Exactly. Yeah. So customers still want to AF fine tune their lenses, right?
Yeah.
And there's people who obviously, I know you asked about autofocusing lenses, but there's people who still want to be able to use manual focusing lenses and make any fine tune adjustments when they want to.
Manual focus lenses, I will say, sometimes I have to fine tune them because they're just not quite there, and for some reason, obviously it's to do with the construction of the lens and the fact that maybe I'm using a lens from like 1979 on a D850, but there's always going to be a little bit out, so it makes
so I think it's more about choice. Do you have to do it? No.
Would you say that, let's say, the mirrorless lenses now require less fine-tuning than, let's say, DSLR lenses? I fine-tune all my lenses on D850.
So the key reason as to why AF fine-tune existed in the first place is that because a DSLR was focusing on a separate sensor.
Exactly.
And you were compensating for the distance between the sensor and the actual imaging sensor itself when the picture was taken.
Exactly. So now we don't have that on mirrorless cameras. So why would you fine-tune the lenses then?
So
that's kind of that's where kind of
because you want
I'm confused a little bit because that's the thing, because technically when we fine-tune on DSLRs, they would say try to match to live view. If you can get kind of more or less match, you get a like very good fine-tune done there. On mirrorless,
because even if we talk, even if you remember when Nikon did auto AF fine tune, what that did is it took a shot in live view, it took a shot with the mirror down, and it then compared the two and basically applied the setting yourself. And that was comparing that distance difference. And you're exactly right that we don't have that situation anymore. So why do we need to AF fine tune lenses? Well, you don't. but the option is still
option is there.
Here we have it, folks.
And
no, honestly, that's the question I had, because
you do get people that drop lenses. And you might need to AF fine tune for particular lenses. You might get variation in some older zoom lenses. And obviously, one of the things that has changed is with the AF fine tuning Z6 II and Z7 II, you can fine tune for zoom lenses now. So you can do a wide and a tele.
Yes.
Whereas
that's
you
really
can't
cool.
do that with the 6 and 7.
Yeah, exactly.
That's new. That's on D780, the new cameras, and D6. Z5, I believe. Oh, D6 as well, yeah.
D6 as well.
Now, Woody and someone else also mentioned that the D500 and the D850 also have that AF1, AF mode customization, so it's not just the really expensive bodies.
So yeah, it's in D500, D850 as well.
Yes, it's true. I was being slightly facetious when I said you have to pay extra for it. It wasn't actually something that is the truth. Now, someone says when you're shooting with the EVF in slideshow mode, I guess when you're shooting in high plus, like, has that improved at all? Did you notice? So
technically, because your frame rate's improved,
yeah,
then yeah, because if you were looking at that in a Z6 and if it was firing at 12 frames per second, you're now looking at that from a Z6 II at 14 frames per second.
Yeah.
So it appears faster.
Yeah.
And it shows you the frames faster, if that makes sense. So there is a visible difference.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's, the difference that you want to see, or whether that's going to make a difference to your photography, it varies.
So very important. I'm
going to have my lunch here while you're talking.
Yeah.
So
get the kebab.
Yeah, don't bother about me.
So now Woody asks what's the actual frame rate in high, not high extend, but
5.
high. So 5.5 in the 7 II?
It's the same across all bodies.
Oh, okay. So in the 6 II and the 7 II, it's 5 frames per second. And I guess you can still choose your maximum frame rate in continuous low
yeah.
as you can do with it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now.
I'm happy now.
You're happy now?
Yes.
You got your coffee. Yeah, I was being really mean.
No, I'm ready for another hour. Absolutely.
Woo!
It's happening.
How are you doing then?
I'm fine.
Are you still alive?
Yeah. Think so.
We run purely on caffeine here, you see. So, Blue Top Media says, we use the Z6 currently primarily for video with external monitors and microphones. Can I ask if the access doors will ever be separated rather than one long strip? Which is a pet peeve. Long...
The little rubber thingy.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, you're not the first person that's asked for that, but obviously when we look at the Z6 II and the Z7 II, that hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to all of a sudden change mid-life cycle.
No, sure.
So I wouldn't expect it to change on the camera models that we have here. Whether or not that is something that's implemented differently in future cameras, I don't know.
Sure. I actually seen some companies cutting them off completely.
I mean, sure, you damage your weather sealing, but go for it.
Well, if you're shooting like indoors all the time,
yeah,
say you've got
it right?
Studio production,
as a studio kind of setup. Ask Rishi to show you how to stop the auto viewfinder switching by moving the rear screen. Oh yeah, because this is something I commented on last week about, like, if you move the rear screen at a certain angle, then you don't get the cutoff. Is that right? Was someone telling me to do that?
That is an actual feature.
Yeah. Is that an actual thing?
It's an actual feature.
Okay, show me.
So
I need it in my life.
You see, the second we finish the stream, I forget everything we talked about.
Right. That's why you put your notes.
That's why I have my notes.
Obviously, let me just check. Yeah, so this is in automatic display switch at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's automatically
you
switching.
Move that one.
So let's move those away. I'm gonna.
So that's just automatically switching.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I cover the viewfinder, it switches.
See that. Yeah.
And obviously we can see that, and then all I need to do is I just literally flip the screen out.
Yes.
And now no switching.
Oh my goodness.
So clever.
And then as soon as I flip the screen back, it switches.
Wow.
Magic.
Is that on the Z6 as well?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
This is a Z6 II, Z7 II.
Okay, I was going to say, because I have not found that.
That's worth extra $1,000, isn't it?
Great for landscape.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So, Rishi looks really thirsty. Because we didn't offer you coffee.
I don't drink hot drinks.
Doesn't drink any.
No.
We did try. I
do have some water like down here.
They think we're really mean. horrible people. Like, we're going to drink coffee over here. You're not allowed.
This is our stream, not yours.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
No, we did try. We're not horrible people.
Well, you are. No.
Like, so many people were asking. That was They were very concerned for you and for your well-being.
I'm glad that people like me.
It's very important. Now, in terms of the video recording limit, just diving in and out of the questions here. So the video limit of 30 minutes or 29 minutes 59 seconds, the legislation on that was removed like a few years ago, but Nikon haven't.
I don't know if it officially was.
It was.
Right.
I have checked. Okay. I've checked the legislation.
We contacted the legal team.
And you went to court and everything.
I was just curious if it was because of, with the cameras that don't have that cutoff do tend to show overheating issues. And I wondered if it was something to do with that or whether it was just that Nikon hadn't cottoned onto it yet.
I've never seen anything to say that, we're going to change this or we're not going to change it or why we don't change it or anything like that. It's just something that is the way that it is.
You should tell them. Just say, by the way, just in case you
this is the way.
The key thing to think about is that we've never had any overheating issues with Z6 and Z7.
Yeah.
Even if you were continuously recording,
like some other companies.
Even if you were just continuously recording, you just press the record button.
Yeah.
And you didn't have any issues, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're streaming with a Z6, and it doesn't.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I've never done more than an hour with it, so hopefully it's.
Yeah, there's a bit of steam coming out from the camera, but it looks fine.
Generally doesn't overheat, which is a very good thing. I'm sure if we recorded for like 5 hours straight off an AC adapter, it would probably get very hot. But we're also not recording in 4K.
And I think the key thing is that your environment, changes a lot as well, right?
Yeah.
So how much the camera body can emit that heat.
Yeah.
While still being weather sealed.
Yeah.
For some cameras, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I don't think our limitation. It's not a hardware limitation. I don't know why it is there. But they just record for 29 minutes and 59 seconds, and you press the button again, and away you go again. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if there could be a feature like in the menu where you can set when you stop at 30 minutes, let's say, to start video automatically or something like this.
Sure.
Just to answer your question, Ganesh B, it is possible to move the AF points on the touch LCD. If you've got the touch screen on, you just push where you want the AF points to be. It's quite useful when you're shooting video or if you're on a tripod and you're using the live view on the back, because then you can just tap.
Wherever you tap is where it's subject tracks.
Yeah, and you can set it to tap and take a shot straight away, or just tap it and change the focusing point, or you can turn it off and navigate with the D-pad as well, the old-fashioned way.
Stand back, everyone. Con has a coffee, as Colin said. No laptops will be harmed in the making of this live stream.
The question is that your picture on there?
No, that's Ian Wooler.
Oh, okay,
he sent it to us,
right.
so it's.
That was taken with a 300 PF, and I think.
And it's also not a picture of me.
So not a picture of you, and I think it's a D850, but I can't remember. Ian's going to tell me later which camera it was, but it was with a 300 PF and a 2x converter.
I always like pictures of kingfishers.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Okay, so I've answered that one. We've talked about the Zelda. That's very good. Will there be a new DX camera coming out for the Z system?
I mean, obviously, we can't talk about new products.
We don't know.
One thing that I would say is if you look at, so it's just over 2 years now that Nikon launched the Z series.
It's time, isn't it?
And no, what I was going to say was,
hold your.
What I was going to say was that in that 2 year period, we started with Z6 and Z7.
Yeah.
And now we have this really nice full suite of bodies. So we have Z50, Z5, Z6, Z7, Z6, and Z7 II as well.
Yeah.
So we are continuously expanding, right? And not just bodies, but also lenses.
Yeah, the lenses is the next thing. Now, I know this is a slightly longer stream than usual, but I am very, very grateful for you sticking with us because we do want to talk about the lenses.
Yeah.
Some of these we haven't been able to see until now. Am I right? Are these also pre-production models?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the 1424. A few of you were saying that Constantine looks like a tiny little baby.
Because I am.
Because the distortion, we're using the 14 to 30 f4, and obviously we're using it at its widest end, so you will get distortion with that lens.
In the real world, it's a beautiful face.
In real world, Con is about the same height as I am.
The lens just doesn't do me justice today, so...
and also, our paperwork obviously looks very long, so it looks like we're using foolscap paper.
A3 notepad.
Yeah.
But guys, it's a shame that you're going to miss the after show where we're going to talk all upcoming products that haven't been announced yet. But it is what it is,
No, we're not. Sorry, did you have a question? 10 minutes.
We have to wrap up in 10 minutes.
Okay. So this is the 1424 2.8 in my hand. It is very light.
That's the main thing. The first thing when you pick that up, especially compared to the F mount 1424.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's smaller and lighter.
1424.
And that is just making use of Z mount, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. And I noticed it's got all the different holders. It's got a holder for filters.
So you can't put it on straight away because there's some cutouts.
So that lens cap only works on that lens. Because it has cuts out.
Yeah, don't lose this cup. It's going to be expensive.
That cap doesn't actually have a millimeter rating either.
Oh gosh, so it's just going to... Oh, it's got a really long code as well. Great. So in terms of distortion, from what you've seen so far, is this better at 14 than the 14 to 30?
It's definitely sharper. Okay. I've not really tested distortion.
Okay.
But in terms of actual overall picture quality and corner sharpness, yes.
Wow.
I think the key thing is going to be size, weight, and picture quality is an improvement as well.
Yeah, exactly. So there you've got the 1424 2.8 f mount. It is remarkably heavier. Just when I was thinking, I thought, oh my goodness, I forgot how heavy it was.
This is nice.
So we've got that. We've also got the 51.2. I've just taken a couple of shots with it, but it is a beautiful lens. So nice. The depth of field is pretty amazing. I would say, who would you say this lens is for, Rishi?
So the key thing for 51.2 is it's mainly aimed at outdoor kind of portrait photography, low light portrait photography, weddings, events photographers and things like that.
Yeah.
It's for people who want that shallow depth of field. It's for people who want that look that you can only get from a 1.2 lens.
Yeah, I have a
I want one.
I have a 55 f1.2 AI, which
Sure.
I love. And actually on the D850, okay, it's not super sharp at 1.2, but that's kind of not the point of it, if you know what I mean. It's for bubbly bokeh. Yeah. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
But looking at this, it seems super sharp on the subject, even at 1.2.
Yes. As with like a lot of our other Z mount lenses, they're incredibly sharp, wide open.
Yeah.
And, this is one of the reasons as to why it's the size that it is. It's just so incredibly sharp, wide open.
We wish we could show you these photos.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to work.
You can't really see it. And then obviously you're not going to be able to get any idea of what it's like. But
that's pretty good.
It's nice.
It's pretty good. It's very nice.
Oh, look at that bokeh.
That's what the other side of the room looks like. And then you brought something else for us. You can see the teleconverter.
Oh, yes. I've got a 2x teleconverter there. Yeah.
Okay, so this thing is out already, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I've got 7200 as well.
Yes, I haven't been able to put my hands on one of these.
That one is in the flesh. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. I'll take that, and we run away together.
Yep, off we go to go and take pictures.
All the things you could take.
Just the 70-200.
Yeah.
My pockets are big.
You have no idea. The size of my waiting list on the 70 to 200 2.8 is painful, and the conversations I have to have with people about how we don't have them yet. So that is the converter. That's heavier than the existing converters. There's quite a lot of glass.
It's significantly better.
Yeah.
And I'll be as honest as anybody. When everyone ever asks me about recommendations for teleconverters, in previous like F mount teleconverters, I'd always say the 1.4 is my most used.
That is the sweet spot.
I love the 1.4, but actually, I still really love the 1.4, and the 1.4 is still my choice. But the 2x tele with the Z mount 2x tele with the Z 70 to 200 is actually a really good combination as well.
Okay, and in terms, have you tried the 1.4 Z as well?
Yeah, okay. I have the 1.4.
Oh, you've got it there. So in terms of differences between the two, because there was always like a real chalk and cheese difference between the 1.4 and the 2x in the F mount versions. So quality wise, what would you say about this?
So I'd still say that the 1.4 is going to be the better of the two. But the 2x is still a justifiable choice.
I just like big prime lenses.
Yes.
Something
very happy.
Have you not got it knocked?
We do. We're not allowed to take it out of the box.
Yeah.
It's upstairs.
I tried.
Apart from the one that we did for our unboxing video, we don't have a knocked on demo.
Sure.
It is an $8.5 lens. So
So Dooney can have employee or student discounts for 1.2 lens.
Pre-releases.
Yes.
You'd have to talk to your account manager.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of people are just asking about the macros. I mean, obviously they're on the roadmap. We don't know when they're coming yet, but
we will know after the show.
We will. I don't think we will. We will hopefully see some more lens releases. In fact, we will undoubtedly see more lens releases next year.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we just don't know. You just don't know what those lenses are going to be.
Yeah.
But yes, and also one thing I was going to say is that we've obviously added a couple of extra lenses to the roadmap as well.
Yeah.
So we added the 85.
Yes.
And we also added the 400 and the 600.
600. And is the 85, we don't know the aperture on that one yet?
No, we do not know the aperture.
Okay.
1.2.
1.2.
But we know that we already have a 1.8. So.
Yeah, nice. Exactly. So go figure. It's not going to be an f3.5, is it?
What are you looking forward to yourself? Like, what's the kind of lens you're looking forward to?
Absolutely. Like, so if you were to ask me that before we launched, before we updated the roadmap, it was the 100 to 400, the 200 to 600. Yeah. I really love those longer focal lengths.
Yeah.
I'm a really big fan of the 200 to 500, and I'm a really big fan of my 500 PF as well. So, especially with a lot of the wildlife stuff that I shoot, because I do landscape, but the landscape's already covered. I'm happy with the 14 to 24. I'm happy with the 14 to 30.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that, but I really want longer lenses. So, yeah. And before we mentioned the 400 and the 600, I was like all about those lenses. But now with the 400 and 600 on there, I was like, oh my god, that really shows a point of direction, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the more telephoto lenses we see in catering to the wildlife and the sports photographers, kind of the more people will get in the Z fold, if you like, because. Obviously, for most sports and wildlife photographers, those who haven't been able to get their hands on the 70 to 200 yet, they're still adapting lenses, or they're not looking at the Zeds at all yet. So there's a few other more generic questions. For those of you asking, what's better, Canon or Sony or Nikon, we probably won't answer that on this stream, but at some point we might do something once I've actually...
someone's asking, do you have a girlfriend?
Are they asking you?
No,
I'm taken.
As am I. No one was asking me, but I just thought I'd mention it anyway. Thank you, Adrian, for your contribution to the Coffee Fund. If there was anyone that I missed, I don't think I did, but if I didn't, thank you very, very much for that. There's a couple of other things. I will go through the comments again afterwards because I think that there are some topics for other streams. But the more techie questions I think we've asked. Was there anything else that you wanted to
ask? I got some questions. So before we wrap up, so let's talk serial questions. Real questions. Serious.
Sure.
Serial.
Sure.
I have a real, but it says serial. Okay. So with Nikon F6 phased out, when will be the Nikon F7 announced and what specs will it have?
Probably not.
None.
You broke my heart, man.
No.
Broke your heart.
No, I don't think it was.
I mean, the F6 was manufactured for a long time, right? So
yeah.
So that was a time.
I love it. No.
It's funny because our F6 stream is going to be around Halloween.
Our F6 stream is next week. So for those of you wanting to hear a little bit more about my favourite film camera, next week is the stream.
Everyone has to dress up either as a Joker or Spider-Man. Okay, so that's important for next stream.
You're going to be dressed up.
I might be. I don't know. Might dress up as a witch. Who knows? Just for I get my zombie contact lenses in.
Yeah, I'll just smoke the eyes, basically. Yeah, panda. I don't know.
And the stream has gone off the rails.
Yeah. Okay. Well, while it's going this way, so have you pre-ordered PS5 or Xbox, or are you a Nintendo person yourself?
I am a person of all consoles, so I actually have all three existing.
Oh wow.
Okay. What about PC Master Race?
Used to be, not now.
All right.
Yeah. Used to be, not now. But a couple of my friends are PC Master.
Did you manage to get a PS5 order in though?
No. So I'm going to wait because I want to wait for God of War.
Yeah, I can sell you mine at a good price.
This is a different stream now.
I can literally swap it for 50mm 1.2 straight swap.
I'm sure that makes sense, but probably not.
Right, excellent. It is lovely to have you all with us. Thank you very much to everyone who has joined. Thank you very much to Rishi.
Thanks for having me.
Rishi, where can we see more of you?
Yes.
Of me?
Tell us.
If you want to see more of me, I'm not sure why you would, but if you do want to see more of me, you can either follow me on my Instagram account where I generally post a lot of my photography-based stuff. So
what's the tag?
That is just Nikon and then Rishi, so it's spelled RICCI. And then if you're interested in some of the personal stuff I do on YouTube, then that is just Rishi, RICCI, and then that's just Rishi Talks.
Rishi Talks, there you go.
It's literally me just talking to people.
So if you want to see more of his fine face talking about Nikon stuff and photography stuff, then go and check that out. Thank you to everyone who contributed to our coffee fund, to everyone who has liked or subscribed today. We will be back next week for another live stream. And thank you for all your brilliant questions as well. I think that kept us on our toes sufficiently. Yeah, excellent.
1.5 hours.
Yeah.
That's a record.
It is a record, I think. Wow. It's the longest stream. So we will see you next week. Have a great weekend and a great week. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.